Ever since the invention of the motor car, drivers have been obsessed with speed. But how did this lust for the ultimate fast ride evolve into one of the most popular sports in America? Drag racing was born in the dry lake beds in the California deserts. In the 1930s, as engines got better and drivers got braver, speeds began topping 100 miles per hour. But it wasn't until after World War II that a bunch of kids with cars, hanging out with nowhere in particular to go, turned into something more serious. Popularity grew steadily, but drag racing still remained largely an underground pastime. Races frequently took place on disused military runways, with the first organized event dating back to 1949 at the Goleta Air Base in California. Things were simple and low-tech in those days. Cars were driven to the track or towed in makeshift trailers. Drivers raced over a quarter of a mile, the length of a city block, but without the aid of safety barriers or regulated track conditions. The spectators in particular got a raw deal with no proper grandstands or seating. As the decade turned, drag racing began to get organized. The National Hot Rod Association, NHRA, was founded in 1951 by Wally Parks, and within the decade 2 classes of competition had developed: unmodified stock and a top eliminator. As the sport grew, the first drag racing superstars emerged. The Albertson Olds and Dragmaster Dart were the cars to beat. The Dragmaster Dart was famously owned by Dode Martin and Jim Nelson, and was so successful they used it as a model on which to base cars built for other drivers. La revista Hot Rod y la NHRA trabajaron juntas para convencer al público y en general y especialmente a la policía de que había una diferencia entre los hot roders y los imprudentes corredores callejeros, a veces conocidos como shot rodders. Fomentaron la participación de adultos, como profesores de todos de automóviles y propietarios de todos mecánicos. Los esfuerzos de la NHRA por defender la imagen del hot rodder incluyeron una serie de cortometrajes como The Cool Hot Rod, 1953, en el que un adolescente delincuente aprende que un niño imprudente en un viejo chatarra no es un hot rodder en absoluto. La NHRA inició el Drag Safari de 1954, una gira nacional para fomentar las carreras de resistencia organizadas con énfasis en la seguridad. Patrocinado por Mobil Oil, el equipo de safari se reuniría con las fuerzas del orden y funcionarios locales de la ciudad y en cada parada para explicar su programa, involucrar a clubs automovilísticos locales, establecer sitios y realizar carreras de resistencia. Drag Safari conduciría a los nacionales estadounidenses de 1955 para carreras de resistencia. As the decade turned, drag racing began to get organized. The National Hot Rod Association, NHRA, was founded in 1951 by Wally Parks, and within the decade 2 classes of competition had developed: unmodified stock and a top eliminator. As the sport grew, the first drag racing superstars emerged. The Albertson Olds and Dragmaster Dart were the cars to beat. The Dragmaster Dart was famously owned by Dode Martin and Jim Nelson, and was so successful they used it as a model on which to base cars built for other drivers. However, it wasn't until one of the most serious accidents in early drag racing history in the 1970s that the fundamentals of car design changed. When Don Garlett's front-motor dragster suffered a transmission explosion which split his car in half and cut off his right foot, he vowed to invent a car with the engine in the back capable of being a winner. He succeeded, and within 2 years all car engines sat behind the drivers. From the 1970s onwards, drag racing began to take its modern shape. This was the era of sponsorship, with big companies throwing their support behind teams. Volunteer crew members were suddenly given wages, trailers were turned into mobile workshops, and even the NHRA found a sponsor, allowing it to offer bigger prize money. By 1971, one of the biggest rivalries in drag racing begins between Don the Snake Prudhomme and Tom the Mongoose McEwen, and an unbridled fight to be the best. Hot Wheels, sponsor of both, realized this and reflected it in its 1970 edition. Since then and now, dragster races emit a deafening noise, the value of men, and the possibility that a quarter-mile race ended in an accident and a fireball with twisted irons. They really were tough men. Because of their epic story, the legend simply forms around these two men. Hot Wheels did its homework on perfect marketing and ended up making these rivals very, very famous. At that time, quarter-mile racing was at its peak. It was living its glory days. Every time the Snake and the Mongoose met on the track, it was a guarantee of a dramatic and convincing race. They simply arrived at the line starter for the trophy and glory, since in those times there was not much money involved, and of course they hoped to be alive to race the next day. As a marketing strategy, they did a radio program the day before to make it more interesting. Tom said, "Snake, I'm going to beat you by 3-3, to which Don calmly responded, "Yes, of course, Tom, of course."